Hey guys, it's Gwen. I am back with a easy DIY video for Valentine's 2023. These DIYs are very easy and affordable to do. Follow along and hope you enjoy. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel. I do mostly Dollar Tree DIYs, budget home decor DIYs, shopping hauls, and thrift store makeovers. If you're interested in that type of content, please hit that subscribe button and let's get on with this video. For DIY number one, I am using one of these Dollar Tree foam heart wreath decor. It's not really a wreath per se, but it's a wall decor. I did have this already in my stash from previous Valentines, which I came across, and I decided to use it for this DIY project. Here you will see that I am using one of Dollar Tree's macrame cord, and I am simply just wrapping this foam heart over and over until I completely cover the entire heart wreath. I've sped up this process because this process is very repetitive. It's just simply wrapping this macrame cord and using some hot glue here and there to just adhere that cord to the heart form so that it doesn't move. The next step, I will be using some florals and greenery, pieces of it from some of my stash. Some are from the 99-cent store, some are from Dollar Tree. Here I'm taking this piece of fern leaf and I'm just deciding on the placement of this leaf. I wanted to just decorate one side and I'm just doing a dry fit of all the pieces onto this heart wreath form. And then I go ahead and use some small dabs of hot glue and adhere each of the greenery and florals to this wreath form. I decided on making this more of a neutral Valentine decor, which is the reason why I chose the colors that I did, more of the neutral color palette with that tan colored, or not tan, but off-white colored macrame cord along with the white rosebuds and the green leaf. I think this makes a very cute and timeless Valentine piece that you can actually keep out throughout the year if you wanted to. Now, to add some accents of a little hint of pink, I did take some of this seam binding. It's a ribbon, like a satin ribbon seam binding. And I decided to just run that across and loop it through in between each of the rosebuds, just sort of giving it a crinkled or ruffled effect and not necessarily laying it flat, just to add a little dimension. And again, I just used some hot glue to adhere that into place. Next, I'm using this pearl beaded garland that came from the 99-cent store. And just like I did with the seam binding, I'm pretty much going to glue this into place, just looping it around the rosebuds and in between the seam binding, adding a little dimension, and it just gave it that little feminine touch that this heart wreath needed. I wanted this heart wreath to be more neutral, which is why I kept with the color palette that I did. The off-white colored macrame cord with the little rosebuds in the white, as well as a touch of pink in the ribbon and the green leaf. I thought it looked very vintage and romantic, shabby chic, and this could be used throughout the year because of the very neutral colors that I chose. And I wanted to add a little bit more flair to this, so I did take some of this ribbon trim that came from Hobby Lobby And I decided to just sort of outline the heart shape and glue that ribbon into place. It's a very cute, feminine, dainty sort of crochet type ribbon. And I thought I gave it that little added touch that this needed and took it up a notch. Then to add a little hanger, I just took some of this ribbon from Hobby Lobby. It's a striped ribbon, and then twirled it around, used a piece of wire, and just glued it into place. And here you have it. The first DIY is complete. For DIY number 2, I am repurposing this old Valentine heart with all this glitter on it that came from Michael's. I'm also taking this painted white foam heart that came from Dollar Tree, which I am repurposing, using it as a floral foam. Then some random picks from Dollar Tree, as well as some red pom-pom trim in the seam binding. And first I'm going to go ahead and glue that white foam heart into the box and use it as my floral foam. It was already the perfect shape. It was cut out in the perfect size and shape to fit into this box, so I went ahead and used it as the floral foam. I cut up pieces of this rose pick from Dollar Tree and just went ahead and poked them through the foam, just arranging it the way I wanted to. I kept adding more florals until I was pleased with the arrangement. I used some of this baby's breath, just trimmed it and added it to the empty spots. Taking some of that pink seam binding, I decided to wrap that around the heart base, just using some tacky glue, and just glued that all around until I had that ribbon just in the center of that box, just adding a little added interest and a hint of that pink color as well. Then I took that seam binding as well and wrapped it around the heart lid using the same tacky glue as I did for the bottom part. Next, I used this red pom-pom trim to outline the area where I had put the first layer of the ribbon, just adding more dimension and more variation to this lid. Now I was going back and forth with what I wanted to do with this lid. I wasn't sure originally how I was going to use it in this ensemble. I knew I wanted to use it because it has that cute design in the front, and it would just be a waste to just not use it and hide that. So I was going back and forth if I wanted it to be just at the bottom of the heart box and just layered on top of it, but then I knew it would be covering that design. So rather than hiding it, I decided on whether I was going to display it to the side of the box like you see me doing here. But before I move on to that step, I am using some of this moss, green moss, and just adding it to the box to cover the bare spots and giving it more of a finished look. Now getting back to the lid situation, I was playing around with different ideas of how I wanted this to be incorporated. And essentially I decided on this and just added it to the top, just adding a little hot glue. And I think it came out super cute, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Now we're on to DIY number 3. I took one of these XOXO signs. It's just the basic signs that Dollar Tree carries, covered in this tinsel. And I'm also using strands of wood beads from the Dollar Tree. Some paints by Waverly. I have moss, ivory, and celery. First things first, we are going to remove all the tinsel from this decor. And I've gone ahead and sped up that process because it is very tedious. I then unraveled the wood beads and emptied them out into little Ziploc baggies, which I will be filling with paint. And this is how I will be painting the beads in those 3 different colors that I showed you. So this is probably the quickest method of painting beads, because you can essentially get everything done in one shot as opposed to individually painting each piece of bead. So this is definitely the way to go if you want to paint some beads for yourself. You're just going to pour some paint into a sandwich bag and then just roll the beads around the paint until you have it fully saturated. And I did that with all 3 colors. And once you have all your beads fully saturated, you're going to want to empty them out onto a piece of paper or cardboard and just separate them so they don't end up sticking to each other as they dry. And if you want to speed up the drying process, you can definitely use a heat gun if you have one. While I let the beads dry, I used some ivory chalk paint and painted this XOXO decor piece. Next, I'm just showing some things that I use. These are the dried beads. Some pieces of ribbon. These came from, I believe it's Walmart. I got it on clearance. And I just decided to shape out the X using that ribbon as some trim. And just use some hot glue. I glued each of the wood beads in sort of an ombre pattern over the O's. Now on one of the O's, I started with the dark moss green color. And then the center part was the celery color. And the bottom part of the O was in the ivory color. And for the other O, I just sort of reversed the pattern and just did the opposite. I did the ivory in the top and the moss at the bottom, keeping the celery in the middle. Again, it's just to add a little more visual interest, and I think I really like how it looks at the end, and I like the greens a lot, and I think that they coordinate really good together. Again, it has more of a neutral feel. And then again, I'm using some of these white rosebuds, as I did from my other DIY, and a piece of fern, and just sort of outlining those X's and adding a piece of rosebud with a stem on the opposite side of the X. I was really liking the direction this was going. It's very neutral. It has a vintage romantic feel to it, very shabby chic. And I'm just gluing all the pieces down with some hot glue. You can definitely make this to your own liking if you want more of a vibrant color or more of your traditional Valentine colors like pinks and reds. You can make this the way that suits your decor and your style. But again, this is something that you can also keep around throughout the year. It doesn't necessarily have to be just used for Valentine's, just because the colors are very neutral. And you can definitely get away with using this every day. So using some strands of ribbons, some from Dollar Tree and from Walmart, I just went ahead and cut pieces, did the X bow, like layered them on top of each other and just sort of folded them on top of each other and glued them to the opposite side of where the rose was. I also use that same pearl bead strand as I did in the other DIY. Just cutting enough and folding it over and then gluing that on top of the ribbons just to add a little bit more dimension. And again, it really does give it that really romantic feel and vintage vibe. Now, if that's not necessarily your cup of tea, you can customize this your way and leave out anything that you don't like. If you're not into all the frills and all the girly stuff like, pearls and things like that, then you can substitute it. You don't have to do that. You can just leave out anything that you don't like or add what you want to it. This is your DIY. I'm just here for the inspiration. The last thing to do is use this crochet ribbon that came from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to create a hanger for this. Now, if you wanted to use this as a shelf sitter and just lean it up against a shelf or some books, you can. But I like to make hangers for my things just because you have more versatility if you want to hang it up on a gallery wall or somewhere that needs something on your walls. At least you have something to hang it with. And then with that type of ribbon, the crochet ribbon, again, it's keeping with that whole shabby chic, vintage romantic type feel. And I think that it really looks great in the end, and I'm very pleased with it, and I hope you guys like it too. For my fourth DIY, I'm using one of these Dollar Tree boxes with the 4 compartments. I'm also using some wood letters from Walmart, although Dollar Tree does carry these. A piece of lace ribbon, some pearls, and a bag that I got from Dollar Tree. It's one of those faux leather bags that I use to cut out the heart shape. Now, first things first, I'm going to paint this box. I use two coordinating colors, both from the Home Decor folk art brand. And as you see here, I decided to paint the boxes or the squares in colors opposite each other. Then taking some of this music sheet, I'm just going to go ahead and fold it over one side of the box and then cut out the strips and use that first strip as a template to cut out 3 more so that I can use this to cover the sides of this box, just using a glue stick. Now, what I like about using a glue stick to adhere these paper pieces onto a project is you don't get the bubbles that you normally do when you use Mod Podge. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue all those pieces down until I have all the sides covered. Next, I'm going to take some celery chalk paint and paint my letters. I'm just using the letters L, V, and E because I will be using a piece of this faux leather that came from a bag from Dollar Tree and cutting out a shape of a heart, which will act as my O. As you see here, I am sprinkling some fine glitter in clear and just sprinkling that onto the wet paint and speeding up that drying process. Next, I'm getting some of my embellishments and just sort of placing them around this box, getting an idea and a feel for how I want this to look. So the letters I'm using are very flat, and I didn't want it to have that look since, you know, I think it would look better standing out. So I'm taking some of these foam tape. It's a foam mounting tape. Dollar Tree carries them, and I'm just cutting them down to fit the backs of these letters. And so I'm just trimming them as needed. Then I went ahead and glued that piece of lace into place. And using a piece of that Jenga wood block, I am adding that to the back of this heart that I cut out for more of a 3D effect. And I couldn't do it just to the one, so I had to make sure I used that foam mounting tape on all the letters so it would sort of be even with that heart and that the rest would protrude just like the heart does. But before adding the letters, I went ahead and added some buttons behind the L. So I'm just choosing which buttons I wanted to use and trying to see how I wanted them to be placed. And I simply use some hot glue to adhere those. Once all my letters were placed, I went ahead and started adding more embellishments to this. I had this random piece of like a cameo button that I glued on to the pearls. And then I took some of this crochet ribbon from Dollar Tree and just made a simple bow and glued that over the heart. And again, using some of that pearl bead garland, I just cut a piece and folded it over and glued that onto the piece of ribbon. Then I use a ink pad by Tim Holtz Distress Ink and just distress the entire wood box, especially over the music sheets and the corners and edges of this box, just adding a little more vintage look. And I am very happy with the outcome of this DIY, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Now we're on to the final DIY of this video. I am taking one of Dollar Tree's wood bead wreaths from the Crafter Square. I'm also using some stained muslin that came from Hobby Lobby, some scraps of burlap, some pieces of greenery, as well as florals, and I will be keeping this beaded wreath in the original natural color that it is. So for this wreath, I am going to make some rosettes using this muslin fabric. You start off by making a knot on one end, and as you can see, I am looping the piece of fabric, just making sure to go inwards and add hot glue along the way just to keep the folds in place. You're going to want to keep wrapping, creating a rosette effect, and making sure that your fabric is a little bit open so that you have room to fold it and create those pleats. And you're going to keep doing this and repeating it until you end up with a look of a rosebud or a rosette. And it's important that you use hot glue along the way just so your rose does not unravel. And you can start over if you feel like your rose is getting out of hand or out of control, because that can happen if you're not holding it tight enough or if you're not twisting your fabric correctly. But this is essentially how it should look at the end. And then you're just going to want to trim off any of the frayed edges or the loose strings that are hanging, and this is how it looks. And I'm going to repeat the same step, this time in a sped up process. Again, just looping the edge, opening your fabric up a little bit, twisting it inwards, adding hot glue, and just keep twisting and using your other hand as a guide to keep all your pleats into place. And then you're just gonna keep twisting and twisting until you reach the end of the fabric. And just secure everything with hot glue and just trim off any loose or frayed edges. So I am making 2 of these rosettes using that muslin fabric, and this is the stained one that they sell at Hobby Lobby. They also sell the regular colored bleached muslin, but this is more of the stained look. So it has like that old vintage look. I will basically be repeating the same process using this burlap fabric. And this is just some random piece from my stash. It's very frayed, as you can tell. So I will be trimming off a lot of those loose fabric. So you're essentially going to be doing the same thing. You're going to create a knot at the end as your starting point. Twist and loop inwards, adding hot glue along the way. You're going to want to keep twisting inwards, hold it into place and glue it in place. And then trim off any of the excess fabric and strings that are hanging. And then you have yourself a burlap rose. Now you can adjust the rose size depending on the length of the fabric that you choose and the width of the fabric. So obviously if you wanted a bigger rosette or flower, you would have to just adjust the size of your strips of fabric to accommodate the size of the rose that you are wishing to make. So here I'm repeating that same step. I am essentially going to be using 2 of the burlap rosettes and 2 of the muslin rosettes. And then that part is now complete, and I will go ahead and decide on the placement of how I want all my pieces to come together on this beaded wood wreath. And just as I do with all my DIYs, I like to do a dry fit. So what that is basically laying out all your pieces, trying to get a visual of how you want everything to be attached before you actually attach the pieces down. So I wanted these ferns to be the backdrop of this wreath, and I will essentially be layering the flowers onto those fern leaves. And I like to overlap my flowers just so everything is not flat and in a straight row. I don't like that look. I like to stagger my pieces and layer them and tuck the pieces behind each other, off center some. You'll see what I'm doing here. I start off by using 2 of those light green roses, but in the end you'll see that I did change my mind and I just opted to use 1. I thought it got too busy by using the 2 roses, and I did make some arrangements at the end. What you see in the beginning of this starting point is not going to be how it ends up looking, because I did change my mind. As you can see, I am removing some of the pieces and then rearranging. So don't be afraid to rearrange your design if you're not happy with the initial look. Sometimes removing that hot glue can be a beast, but it's not that difficult. So if you do change your mind along the way and you don't like the look of your project, just take it apart and then start over. That's exactly what I did here, because initially I did start by using 2 of those green roses, and then the way I had placed the mini daisies in there too, I really wasn't happy with at the end, so I just rearranged everything. And ultimately, I did like the end result, so I'm glad that I went ahead and changed how I wanted it to look. So here you'll see that I'm using one of those bags from Dollar Tree. It's like the faux leather bags. It comes in black, tan, and this pink blush color. I'm using the pink blush to create leaves and just free-handing like a leaf pattern. I needed this to be a contrast to all of the brownish tones in this wreath, and using this blush pink just gave it that little bit of contrast that this needed, as well as, again, more dimension. Using different types of elements or types of textures, it does add more interest to your project. So I've used muslin, I've used burlap, then I have a faux floral, and then now I'm using like a faux leather piece. So I think all of the elements come together really well in the end. So I just cut off enough of the leaf pieces that I needed to just sort of tuck behind some of the florals. Then taking this piece of daisy that came from the bunch where that green rose came from, I was deciding on where I wanted to glue these pieces to. It did have a nice touch to this wreath because it had like the yellow cream tones. And then I also used some pearl beads and glued those to one of the burlap roses. Again, just adding more interest to this wreath. So far, this project is coming along very well. I am really liking the direction this is going. But to add more interest, I am taking some ribbon from Hobby Lobby. Actually, this ribbon is from Walmart. This was on their clearance during the summer. And I wanted to go ahead and cut enough to where it dangled a little bit at the bottom. And this ribbon's really cute. It's like an off-white cream color. It sort of crinkles and it's like a crochet trim. So I went ahead and cut a length that I was happy with and just glued that into place at the bottom. Then to create a hanger, I just went ahead and looped that around, made a knot, and just tied it around that top. And that will be the hanger to this wreath. You don't really need to use a hanger if you don't want to. You can actually just hang this off of the bead itself, the bead wreath. But I always like a hanger, so I went ahead and created one, and this is the finished look. I am super happy with this look, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed this. Here is a final look of all my DIYs from this video. They are super romantic, super sweet DIYs. They would look great in a vignette all together. A lot of the colors are coordinated to each other. This one is probably the one with the brightest colors of all the DIYs in this video. But nevertheless, it still looks really cute. It's just got that very subtle look. It's such a small DIY. And this XOXO sign, it's such a big statement. And it would look great on a wall alongside this very cute and dainty love shelf sitter with all of the feminine touches. And then you have this lovely wreath, which would look fabulous over a mirror or on a door and can be used throughout the year. So that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Take care.